Hello and welcome to a Monday YouTube edition. Here at Establish the Run, I am Adam Levitan. Of course, I am joined by the biggest Bills fan. I mean, he looks smart. He seems smart. He does math, but he also jumps off of tables and smashes them and smashes the natty ice against his forehead, all in the name of fandom for some random guys he doesn't even know that are going to go out and play a football game. He's excited about it. Big Bills game tonight, Mike Leone.
Yeah, and then I get jerseys of players that get signed to huge contracts and underperform and now aren't on the team anymore. So I got the Mario Williams, but we're wearing the white Stormtrooper jerseys tonight. So this was the only one I had to bust it out.
Okay, on today's show, we are going to get to the 2-game slate, which is Washington Steelers at 5 o'clock, followed by Bills 49ers. You guys know I typically enjoy 2-game slates. I don't think this one is a great one from a salary perspective because it's basically a stone pick 'em, but we will talk about all that when we get to it. Also, we'll be going over week 13, which was a good one for me in cash, was not a great one in GPPs. And I think we can talk about a few reasons why, what happened in GPPs, etc. Before we get into that, I wanted to remind everyone of 2 things. First, this is free. Obviously, all we ask you to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and give us a like on YouTube so we continue to grow the channel and bring you this free stuff. Second, it's NBA season. Leone has been working a lot on getting all of our NBA stuff ready to go. Season starts on December 22nd. If you play season-long NBA, our draft kit is available. Includes Gallagher's top 150, rankings, busts, everything you need to get ready for your season-long draft if you play or plan to play NBA DFS. I mean, all these main slates, we put so much work into each NFL main slate. Imagine doing that every single day for NBA. It's a massive, massive undertaking with 7 straight months of main slates every day. And so check out the full season package if you are interested in playing NBA DFS. Okay. On the screen now, you see one of my teams from the Spin Mover, my only team, the Spin Move. It's single entry, which I was like a 400 and something person field, I believe. And this is one that I thought after the 1 o'clock games had a pretty good chance, although the Waller stuff pretty much eliminated from winning, but I thought it had a pretty good chance at a reasonable finish and then just completely petered out. Now, let me explain, Leone, my thought process behind this lineup. You can tell me if I am sick fish or not. I didn't even really like, and I hate doing this, man, I didn't even really like Russ to Metcalf. I really didn't. I thought the understanding of Seattle not wanting to let Russ cook, of the Giants defense being for real, of Bradbury on Metcalf, of Colt McCoy not being able to force them into anything, made it that it wasn't really that great of a spot for Russ to Metcalf. But I knew no one was going to play him, and I hate making things like, well, I'm going to play this guy because no one is going to play him, but I did it anyways. And then I was like, man, do I even really want to bring it back? I didn't want to do Russ doubles because we've seen Metcalf and Locke have a really hard time going off together. But anyways, and I was like, do I have to bring it back? Because I didn't even like anybody with Colt McCoy. And then I was like, well, I can correlate the tight end spot and fill that. So that was the stack idea. I'll get into other things in a second. But what do you think about that in general, of just like, I don't even really like this, but I'm playing it because no one else is playing it?
Yeah, I think it makes sense when the ceiling's there. I mean, we know Russ and Metcalf have a huge ceiling, and to get Metcalf at 4% in a tournament of this size is absolutely incredible. You know, if I had known he was going to be, I thought he was going to be low. I actually played, I played Russ to Metcalf and Ingram in the Thunderdome. So I went down with you. I can't knock it too much. I think the ownership you got on everything was great. And overall, the lineup, there's a couple things I think you did well that I kind of galaxy brain myself off of, but I'll let you talk through the rest of the lineup before I get into that.
Yeah, and so the rest of the lineup was, I thought I needed to save money. I mean, as soon as you go Russ Metcalf, like, you need to save money. And so immediately I was like, well, I'm not playing Eckler or Aaron Jones or Dalvin Cook. So I was like, I'm just going to take my 2 favorite sub 6K running backs. Those were Gaskin and Montgomery, not worry about ownership. And then I needed to save more money because I had to play my boy Julio, who I thought, just I was too high on Atlanta stuff in tournaments late. I even had Julio in cash for a second there over Cooper Kupp, and thankfully got off that because it allowed me to play Seattle defense over Chargers defense, which would have been a disaster. But then I figured I would correlate Tyler Boyd with Myles Gaskin, which I like, and then Kute with Colts defense, hope Colts defense gets a pick 6 or something like that. and Watson ends up throwing the ball, 30, 40 times. And so, yeah, I mean, I knew that no one was going to play Boyd and Julio. And so, this was way off the board for me in terms of ownership. And I would like to collect my GPP Bro sticker. And I would also like to collect my Sklansky bucks for this team.
Yeah, mission unlocked there with playing a 1% owned player. A couple things I think you did well that I didn't do well this week is one, I got a little fancy with the I know better on the running backs. And, you mentioned this in our Slack chat yesterday. If a running back has goal line touches and targets, they have a ceiling. And I think I overthought the David Montgomery stuff. I said on Wake and Rake that, he's not someone who can bury you. And I think, collectively we've gotten better as players at not game log watching when it comes to like cash games and like median projections, but we still sometimes look at the game logs for ceiling. And even if you looked at Darren Waller, he's someone that for a handful of weeks, it felt like I was over projecting him by 5 points, over projecting him by 3 points. And, it was frustrating. And then all of a sudden, all these small over projections, now all of a sudden I'm under projecting him on the season with a 48-point game, which you can't, you're never going to project 48-point game. But I think the point is to not overthink the ceiling based on just the results. You want to look at, does this workload, come with a ceiling? And it did for Montgomery. And then the other thing I probably made a mistake on was not playing any Kuti in tournaments. He was just so cheap and there was such a target void. My thought was Kuti in a vacuum is not good at this ownership, which I think is like, okay. But if you think about it, there were 3 Texans that were kind of chalky in Kuti, Akins, and Cook. So I think it was completely fine to play one of them because then you're kind of just leveraging off the other 2 and hoping that your guy has the higher target share of the success. So I think those were 2 mistakes. I think what's really interesting, if you look at the winner in this, you mentioned being dead without Waller.
I wasn't.
You weren't. This guy ceded 44 points to Darren Waller. He had Snowflake from A.J. Brown. And if you would have told me that, I would have said there's no way he wins the tournament. He's got the same 2 running backs as you, but this really goes to show you where you're unique. Sometimes you can survive some busts. You can survive some getting some things wrong if you get ceiling performances out of guys that aren't owned. Now, I'm not saying you should have played T.Y. Hilton with the narrative against Houston there, but I do think, you see 6%-ish owned guys that hit ceilings, and he's able to overcome 2 snowflakes not having Waller in the Patriots defense, which is just a huge outlier. But, defenses are kind of volatile. So to have a low owned one, and you had a low owned one in yours, you had a 3% owned defense against a team that was going to throw a lot, which I thought was sharp. And, the correlation on the stack, sometimes we say it burns us, but there's no way this guy plays Corey Davis if he's not correlating in his stack. So that makes up for the fact that Hooper and A.J. Brown being correlated kind of dud out. You might be saying, I wouldn't have played A.J. Brown and Hooper, if I wasn't forcing correlation, but you wouldn't have played Corey Davis either. So you can't have it both ways. So I do think it was an interesting slate. And then my GPP team that I'll show in the 1500, I did a Tannehill stack. Sadly, Adam did not play Corey Davis.
Yeah,
I played the chalk Ferkser at tight end. And, this team went pretty poorly. I played the Rams defense trying to leverage off that game being somewhat popular, particularly the Rams passing side of things. I was happy with that. Chark ended up being a little bit more owned than I expected. Not that 13% is bad, but for a somewhat risky play, I was hoping to get single digits on Chark. And your GPP Bro team, you had actually way more leverage than I did, despite the fact that you played a chalk Montgomery and a chalk Kuti. So I actually think your team was probably structured a little bit better, where mine's more balanced without too much mega chalk. There's Cook and Ferkser, but then it's a bunch of teens guys, whereas yours was kind of more spread out and different tournament. Mine was a higher stake, so the chalk kind of condenses a bit more, but you see, you've got a few guys in the 30% range that were just really good plays, or this is the winning
team. I wish that was my team. That's the winning team.
But like same thing, you had Montgomery, Gaskin, but then you had way more single digit plays. I didn't get any single digit plays in outside of defense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I was a little bit looking back, 2 things that I could have done. And I don't love playing A.J. Brown. I know that's like a super hot take. I know everybody's absolutely in love with A.J. Brown. I absolutely love A.J. Brown too. I think his target volume is just so shaky relative to his ownership a lot that I don't love it. But Corey Davis has been playing so well lately. If I would have thought through that, I would have maybe played some Corey Davis. I didn't play any. And then Darren Waller. I mean, I thought Darren Waller was a pretty good play last week against the Falcons, and he did absolutely nothing at like 30% ownership in cash. And then to find a spot against the Jets for Darren Waller. I mean, the Jets have been getting just destroyed by tight ends, and this was the spot. And so I was like, yeah, I don't really love playing Aguilar. I don't really love playing Hunter Renfrow or Ruggs that much. But if I would have thought it through maybe more, maybe I could have gotten on Waller. I also didn't love the Jets bring back. I thought Mims and Perriman were going to be massively overowned. And so, yeah.
The thing that was interesting too, last night I was kind of like, this is a slate that I'm just not going to win. But now looking through these teams, I'm not so sure. Drew and I talked about established humility. Sometimes we do better, like just with good constructions, and there's not exactly one thing you have to have. And you look at the top, the game changer I was in, it's 3 different stacks that could have won it. None of these teams have Waller, so and thinking, and a big part of the fields I play, which is much smaller fields, like this is a 100-man field, even the 200-man field, even the spin move you play, it's not that big of a field, but thinking through who gets squeezed and who does the chalk condense on, because it's different than MME. And I didn't think Ferkser was going to get to 58%, right? I mean, it's one of those had I known, but as a result of getting that wrong, look at all these. I mean, these teams, all top 10 teams, these are all Ferkser teams.
Yeah.
We don't even have a Waller team up here. I'm trying to find a Waller team to get the ownership, but he came in at like 6% and stuff, which is egregiously low. And you could have maybe, and you lowered your ownership projection Sunday morning, which was accurate. And the tea leaves were kind of moving that way, where with the value running backs in Montgomery and Gaskin and Devontae Booker, I thought, okay, I'll play an expensive receiver instead of playing an expensive Dalvin Cook. But then I was like, well, Devontae Adams seems like he's, you bumped his ownership up too. Yeah. And Henry stayed high and Cook stayed high. And it's kind of like, well, who's the guy that's going to get left out? And, it was Waller. And obviously the results was like a 99th percentile result, but it was still to get a 6% Waller when there's no floor tight end at 60%, that's a good play regardless of the result.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Anything else yesterday that you want to take away from?
No, I think that's, pretty much it. On to next week.
All right. We're on to, not next week, we are on to Monday night as the NFL schedule continues to expand. 2 games Monday, 1 game on Tuesday. We do have 2-game slate projections up, which Leonie is showing right now. We have showdown projections up for both of tonight, full showdown breakdown. And then tomorrow we will have the full showdown breakdown for the Ravens game. Zooming out on this, I just want to say one thing about Pittsburgh. This is their 3rd game in 12 days. They also lost 2 key defenders. Bud Dupree is down now also. And so, it's a reasonably tough spot, I think, for Pittsburgh. Again, 3rd game in 12 days. Washington, meanwhile, has not played since Thanksgiving, for whatever that is worth. Let's start the quarterback position. The one guy that I think I don't want to play is Alex Smith. I assume the field is going to think that way as well, but we don't have him that far off in terms of value versus the other guys. I still think the other 3 guys are very much in play: Mullins, Ben, and Josh Allen. I would probably be leaving Alex Smith out, but I'm sure from an ownership perspective, the GPP bros are going to tell me that Alex Smith should not be left out.
The issue with Alex Smith is the salary is so loose that, and we saw this on Thanksgiving when we were talking through, Dalton and some of the guys too, where it's like, maybe he is the best. There's a chance he comes out as the best value on the slate, but the odds that you almost need him to outscore the quarterbacks from a raw total perspective. And if I'm going that cheap and doing a, kind of a contrarian build, I'm just playing Mullins instead of Alex Smith. So I don't think it's terrible to leave Smith out. If you're doing a large field MME, like you're doing a full 150 team set, I'd probably play some just to, maybe even if it's only 5%, which is like incredibly low then compared to the other guys, just to get it in there just in case something weird happens and correlate those correctly. But if I was doing like a 20 max, for example, I might just cut him out completely.
Yeah. Okay. I think a lot of people are going to be asking, is Josh Allen or Ben Roethlisberger the better play? Because again, you can fit anything. I mean, even if you play Josh Allen to Steph Diggs, who is the most expensive quarterback, the most expensive wide receiver, you can still easily fit in anything that you want. So basically it's a stone pick him. I would encourage people, much like Thanksgiving, it is more than okay to leave money on the table. But just from a raw perspective, I think that Josh Allen is significantly better to me than Ben Roethlisberger. We've seen Washington pass rush excel. We've seen Washington slow teams down. We've seen Washington hold quarterbacks down, whereas, San Francisco is lacking talent, and they've been okay. They've been so decimated by injury. But I think that Josh Allen's ceiling, thanks to rushing, thanks to pass rate over expectation, is just through the roof. And so I know Ben's been passing a ton also, but I prefer Josh Allen by a pretty wide margin, probably wider than the 1 point that we have here. I would prefer Josh Allen to Ben Roethlisberger. What do you think?
Yeah, and in tournaments too, when you're thinking of pure ceiling, that definitely adds to it where, maybe it's 1 point in mean type projection, but the guy who could blow the slate away is going to be Allen. And what's interesting too is that you could even do, Roethlisberger stacks with Allen as your quarterback. Granted, you're going to have a little bit of everyone on the slate anyways, but you could double up Pittsburgh receivers pretty easily and maybe only have one Bills receiver with Allen just because the rushing upside's so big. Part of the reason why the projection's close-ish is, matchup compared to neutral is a little bit better for Roethlisberger in terms of like team total than it is for Allen, on the road, West Coast against San Francisco. And then also Allen loses John Brown, who, his efficiency has been really strong. And, not just him individually, but the offense as a whole seems to have operated a little bit better when Brown's been in there. So that's part of the reason why the mean projection's close. But I'm with you that from a ceiling perspective, if I was making one team, I would be taking Josh Allen.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd say on Nick Mullins is like he's really not worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. Like he's really not. And so whatever takes you out about Jimmy G, I would not lower your San Francisco expectations going down to Mullins. Let's go to the running back position. And everybody saw Antonio Gibson just go absolutely nuclear on Thanksgiving. His two huge games have been against Dallas. He hasn't exactly blown the doors off on any other team. Now, that said, Antonio Gibson's talent is clearly through the roof. We always knew that he could catch the football, that he would be explosive. Now he's running between the tackles as well. That said, very, very difficult matchup against Pittsburgh, and we're still going to see plenty of J.D. McKissic. As you can see in our projections, we only have McKissic 4.3 points behind. So talk about how we have Gibson versus McKissic and Barber projected out.
Yeah, I think we have Gibson even like a little bit, probably that our efficiency on Gibson is probably a little bit too high in this matchup. So I might bring down his projection somewhat. We're not expecting Barber to play much, but he just gets enough there that it's kind of annoying. The Gibson versus McKissic thing is really interesting because I think people are I don't want to say overreacting because I think Gibson is a really high ceiling play, someone I love in Dynasty, but I don't know if his role has really changed over the last 3 weeks than what it was before, so much as Washington's just been in the right spots. They've had the goal line looks. They were always Gibson's goal line looks. They've just generated more of those opportunities because they played well. And then conversely, because they played well and scored, they've been in a positive game script, and that keeps Gibson on the field. That gives him more rush attempts. McKissic still seems like the third down back, the catch-up back. So in a tough matchup against Pittsburgh where Gibson doesn't get the efficiency on the ground, and if Pittsburgh pulls away a little bit, McKissic's a really interesting GPP play on a slate where people don't really need the cap relief. I like McKissic on DraftKings in particular with full point per reception. FanDuel, not as much. But either way, I think Gibson's, a decent fade on this slate. I think Snell is going to be really popular after people saw his usage last week, and there was a pretty big gap between him and McFarland. But Mostert maybe goes under the radar a little bit. Really big play guy. I like the upside of Mostert. I think he's going to come in lower owned than Gibson and is probably a better tournament play than Gibson.
Oh, yeah. This is a great spot for Raheem Mostert to be incredibly efficient with his runs. I will note on the San Francisco stuff, Tevin Coleman is expected to be active in this game. Well, he's eligible to be active. We'll see because they have four backs now with McKinnon, Wilson, Tevin, and Mostert. We're currently projecting all four of them to get a little bit of action. Wouldn't surprise me if one of them, though, is a healthy scratch tonight. We will see on that. Obviously, we'll update this once the inactives come out. But yeah, I think that I would rank them Mostert, Snell, Gibson once adjusted for ownership and salary. Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at the Pittsburgh stuff from week 12, just to bring it up real quick, Snell was on the field 70% of snaps compared to McFarland's 19% of snaps, 16 carries to 3, 4 targets to 1. The targets I wasn't sure on going into that game. I had a little bit more even, but then it's tough. Maybe they do even it up a little bit more this game. You never know because it's not like we have a huge sample, but everything from last week tells us that it's, Benny Snell borderline workhorse role and McFarland the clear, 2, not 1B.
Yeah. Okay. I think a lot of this slate's going to be decided at the wide receiver position because we're really splitting hairs between Diggs, McLaurin, Deontay, Claypool, Debo, Juju, Ayuk. I mean, all these guys you could make a case for to finish as the best wide receiver on the slate. You have hometown knowledge on Mr. Steph Diggs, whose opportunity this year has just been absolutely through the roof. Like any advanced metric you look at, Stephon Diggs is among the league leaders this season. What do you think about this spot? It's certainly no cakewalk matchup against Richard Sherman and the 49ers DBs.
Yeah, and we do have, the Bills passing game overall, you see with Allen's projection scaled back a little bit. The nice thing with the Bills passing, offense, they're 4th in the entire NFL and pass rate above expectation heading into this week. And, they're going to put it up in the air, especially if this game's close or if they're behind. And with John Brown out, you're going to see the targets for Diggs. I'm looking at the last 4 games for Diggs, target share 30.5%, 40 targets. That's averaging 10 targets a game, double-digit targets the last 4 games. That's with John Brown, I think, only out for one of those games, which was last week. So, like a lot of volume potential for Diggs. So, he's the safest from a volume potential. And then the Steelers guys they're a little bit cheaper and we're expecting a little bit more efficiency out of them. But I think the clear 1 in raw projection is Diggs.
Yeah. Okay. Terry McLaurin's opportunity, similar to Steph Diggs, has just been absolutely off the charts. Also, he is going to play in this game. I know he was listed questionable with an ankle injury, is going to play. Not too worried about that. Am worried about the pressure that Alex Smith is going to be under from the Steelers defense here. What do you think about McLaurin? Because I can make a case that the Steelers guys might be better, even though they're like sharing opportunity three ways, and McLaurin is just the absolute alpha.
Yeah, I think I'm torn on this because I think that's a really good point where when you have a situation like Pittsburgh where you've got 3 guys pretty evenly distributed, that doesn't actually occur during the game. It's more likely one of these guys is going to pull ahead and one of these guys is going to pull below, and which means one of these guys is probably going to be better than McLaurin. We just don't know which one ahead of time. On the flip side, I like McLaurin leverage off Gibson if Gibson's owned and if it gets into a negative game script where you rack up pass attempts. Washington's been a little bit more pass heavy recently anyways, at least relative to game script. The game scripts have been favorable though. So I'm a little bit in between on Washington. And then I think you need to talk about the Pittsburgh receivers, Adam. I feel like I'm not allowed to do that legally.
Well, I understand that Deontay Johnson's yards per target have been awful. Earning a target is a skill. He did have 4 drops last week, which made it. But I would reiterate that earning targets is a skill. And Deontay Johnson has clearly been the guy that Ben likes most. Now, all of these targets for Juju and Deontay are coming so close to the line of scrimmage. So you need that volume. You need touchdowns to get there. Claypool is the guy who can actually break a big play. But yeah, it's hard to parse between these guys. I still think that Ben likes throwing to Deontay the most. I think Juju's routes are so close to the line of scrimmage that it's hard for me to really get excited about Juju. We did see him find the end zone last week, and Claypool's the one that I'm excited about, but obviously I think his target projection is probably slightly below the other guys, but the ADOT makes up for it. So yeah, I mean, if I was playing 1, it would be Deontay. If I was playing 1 in tournaments, it would probably be Claypool. And I don't really have bad things to say about Juju other than like he needs like 8 for 60 and a touchdown to get there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, part of my anti Deontay Johnson sentiment is just I feel like the market has really killed Juju for an inefficient year. And he's actually been more efficient than Deontay Johnson. But at the end of the day, your point about earning targets being a skill, that's what's most important. The volume's there for Deontay. That's why he projects the best. If you were playing a cash game, you would take Deontay. I think you're spot on. And then in tournaments, Claypool, because it's just the big play upside, he's been absolutely unbelievable. Pittsburgh also, up there in pass rate over expectation. And that's really skyrocketed over the second half of the season too. So, where you might set them might even be even more to the left of this graph that you see here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can play multiple Pittsburgh pass catchers, I think, pretty easily in this game. I think that's fine. I like maybe mixing Claypool with one of Deontay Juju, where maybe you get some big plays out of Claypool, and then you kind of hope to guess right over who's going to get more catches, just raw catches between Deontay and Juju.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, Pittsburgh's offense has literally just turned into short pass after short pass when they used to be so vertical. But anyways, San Francisco wide receivers we need to talk about, because this is the first time that Kendrick Bourne, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel are all healthy together this entire season, I believe. And so there's some confusion, I think, and some downside to the projection where we don't know between James and Bourne exactly who's going to be out there. I kind of think it'll be Kendrick Bourne mostly, but Richie James has played well and played ahead of Bourne last week. Deebo and Ayuk, I think I would have closer than we have it here a little bit, but Deebo looked so good and was such a target monster last week. So many of his targets come behind the line of scrimmage. Like his air yards this year are so funny. He has like no air yards, but it's still been really, really productive. And same with Ayuk. I mean, they don't throw the ball to Ayuk that far down the field either, but he's going to get plenty of yak chances as well. Anyways, Ayuk is back healthy. Everybody's back healthy. What do you think about the gap between Deebo and Ayuk and how we're projecting that?
Well, the injury return model is undefeated. So Ayuk, what on ownership's looking pretty good. I do think there's a chance Debo's over-owned on this slate just because of the huge game last week. And now people not accounting that Ayuk coming back. Like, we still expect a lot of really strong opportunities for Deebo, but Ayuk probably cuts into that a little bit. We didn't have either Bourne or James projecting as close to Deebo as we do with Ayuk this week. And as far as the cheap guys, if I was a good way to get contrarian on this slate where it's really loosely priced is to play a cheaper receiver that ends up with a top 4 score overall and you leave some money on the table. I think I'd rather go to Gabriel Davis on the Buffalo side of things over Bourne and Richie James. And we talked about Buffalo, but we talked about Diggs, but Gabriel Davis played, basically when Brown has been out, he hasn't left the field. 97% snap share. Last game with Brown out, the previous 2 on the year, it was about the same. I think he's very good. I think, the production hasn't been as good as maybe we hoped, but he might be a baby Gam in the making in Gabriel Davis. I'm probably being a homer there. They've also used him in the red zone quite a bit. So, it's not crazy that Gabriel Davis has a game, even where you look at last week, he outscores Diggs because he had bigger plays and a touchdown. And sometimes Diggs with Brown out, it's getting, the coverage is like coming down on him a little bit, and he's getting some of these lower A-dot routes. And then, Beasley, of course, can rack up catches out of the slot. So the Bills' secondary receivers are really interesting to me as far as the guys that aren't going to pop in optimal lineups because you don't need the cap relief, but they do have enough of a ceiling to just on raw total get into the top 3 or 4 receivers on the slate.
Yeah, the guys I have at running back and wide receiver less than 5K on DraftKings who I think are actually in play would be in tournaments to have the ceiling to be in play would be McKissic, Cole Beasley, and Gabe Davis. Okay, Let's go to tight end. And this is, part of the reason that part of the reason is Gibson is the most expensive running back at 6,500 and Diggs is the most expensive wideout at 7,500. But now at tight end, even if you wanted to spend money at tight end, you can't. It's not even on the slate. Jordan Reed is in the air yards by low model. Jordan Reed is not going to play a ton of snaps. He's not going to be out there for every snap, but when he's out there, he is targeted at such a high clip. I think with Ayuk coming back, we have to project him for a little bit less and then them having all of their guys back. But I still think Jordan Reed, and given the matchup, I think Jordan Reed I'd have Jordan Reed a little bit, the gap between Jordan Reed and Logan Thomas, a little bit wider in my opinion, but I get that Logan Thomas has had massive opportunity this year. What do you think about those guys before we get to Ebron?
Yeah, I think it's really close where Reed, I think, has more upside. I think he's probably a more efficient player. The targets per route run is really high. As you said, he's utilized when he's out there. And there's a chance that maybe some of that Kendrick Bourne Richie James target share we have projected, maybe a couple of those points really slide Jordan Reed closer to like an 18% target share guy instead of a mid-teens target share guy, which would pretty clearly make him kind of the default value. So I prefer him to Logan Thomas.
Yeah, and Ebron, Ben likes throwing Ebron, and Ebron's played well, and Ebron lines up as a wide receiver. He lines up in the slot. I mean, Ebron is the kind of usage that you want from your tight end. Washington has been fine against tight ends this year, but yeah, I like Ebron just fine. I mean, I think it just kind of is what it is on Ebron.
Right. I mean, the target share is probably not even going to be like all that much better than Reed or Logan Thomas. It might even be a little bit worse, but the team total there it's come down a little bit. I'll have to double check that. The game total here has come down a couple points from the beginning of the week, but the team total is still much higher for the Steelers than it is for the Niners, than it is for Washington. And as a result, Ebron at a pretty touchdown dependent position pops ahead of those guys. But I think it's fine to save money on the other guys. It's probably actually even preferred.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to defense. Obviously, on a main slate, I would not be spending $4,500 on a defense. However, we have this spot where the Steelers are the number 3. Steelers defensive line versus Washington offensive line is the number 3 DLOL mismatch in Thorn's rankings, even with the injuries that I mentioned to the defensive line of the Steelers. And so I think paying $4,500 is very, very, very much in play against Alex Smith and this offensive line. And you can easily do it. I mean, it's not hard to do it whatsoever. What do you think about spending up for the Steelers on FanDuel? I mean, it's a no-brainer. On DraftKings, you have to spend a little bit more in your cap to do it.
Yeah, I think that's where, if you're willing to play a cheaper wide receiver in the mix, you can get up to this Steelers defense. And I like that strategy quite a bit, where you could kind of run away with the slate on the defense. I will say, if you want to get contrarian in tournaments, the Washington defense, because people don't need cap relief, likely goes under owned. I just mentioned the Pittsburgh team total is the highest on the slate, but the game total has come down. And this pass rate over expectation, that works both ways. That's sort of what you want to see when you're picking a fantasy defense, is the ability to rack up sacks, rack up interceptions, big plays. Those occur on dropbacks, and Pittsburgh's going to drop back quite frequently as long as the game script in this game stays somewhat close. So, based on how you think the game's going to go, you could make an argument for Washington as one of the better GPP defenses on the 2-game slate.
Yeah, in Thorn's defensive line pass rush rankings, Washington is 3rd right now. Steelers are 1st. And so, yeah. I also think that given the rate that the Bills drop back and given the rate that Josh Allen makes mistakes and can make mistakes, San Francisco is in play. And then I'm fine with the Bills also against Nick Mullins and a depleted 49ers offensive line. So I actually think all 4 defenses are very, very, very much in play.
And if you're playing in large field tournaments, you're doing a full 150 set, I would really probably have pretty even ownership. I know that's boring, but I'd have pretty even ownership to the defenses because of that. And sort of just naturally, I'll be overweight on a couple of them and underweight on a couple of them based on what the field does. But I don't see any reason to take a super hard stance. And make sure, especially when you get these pass heavy teams, make sure you're allowing 2, even 3 pass catchers, maybe even against the defense that you play. Adam, you on the main slate played Kuti against the Colts defense with cheap pass catchers. That's always viable. On a 2-gamer especially, you want to let it ride. And that's even more the case when you get really high pass expectation teams like Buffalo, like Pittsburgh in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. That is going to do it for this 2-game slate, week 13 wrap up show. Again, we'd appreciate it if you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. We'll continue doing these YouTube free shows as long as we can. Yes, smash the like button. Exactly. And again, another reminder on NBA. Guys are grinding really hard. There's also an NBA YouTube channel that we have launched. Go ahead and check that out. Separate YouTube channel just for NBA and free NBA podcast. It's been really good. I've been listening as I try to get ready for this NBA season. All right. Good luck tonight. Good luck to your Bills tonight, Leone. Try to take it easy on the alcohol and the smashing of the natty ices against the forehead and stuff like that.
I got to get a table ready for tonight.
Okay. for Leone, for producer Leone. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.